Good evening, Daniel. How are you?
Good, good. How do I sound this evening?
You sound fabulous. Oh, I see you're in the grand living room. I'm so glad.
I know every time I have it up when I do a podcast with someone else, they're like, you guys moved in together. I said, no.
I love it. It's beautiful. You know, it really is. So I know you watched my half hour and the insanity, but you know, all of that is what got us, got you to what you're fighting for and what you're doing today. We all know that you're fighting City Hall, and you're doing it with 39 enumerated rights, because we are here in New Hampshire. You're fighting it with the state constitution, and people are partially deaf. They're still deaf. So bring us up to date. What's going on with your cases? What is the insanity now and their response to you? Because I know that the town and the state pulled the same little, what would you call it, ploy in an effort to dissuade you and put you off the track. But, you know, that's not going to happen. So bring us up to date, and then we'll dive into, you know, the juicy parts that interest people so that maybe they'll go read and learn.
Sure. So why don't I back up to the very beginning? Last year, I filed a lawsuit in Rockingham County alleging that the legislature has repeatedly and habitually changed our voting laws without getting the voters' consent. That's as simple as I can make it. There's an amendment process which the election laws must be changed. If our state constitutional election laws are to be changed, then they have to go through the process. And that's what's happened. They've been changed by legislative action, and the only way to stop them is to use the courts.
So an example would be Massachusetts. The voters did vote in the Dominion machines, so that's why they have them. But the citizens and voters of New Hampshire never voted that in, and it was never put out to be voted on, correct?
Absolutely. And it causes something to happen in Massachusetts that's not happening here. And it's part of the cheating game going on. And that is because the legislature did get the consent of the voters, it's tasked to write all of the rules, regulations necessary for all of the communities, in every single voting station in the state has to have the same voting laws. They have to be equal throughout. It's required by Article 11 of our Bill of Rights. It's required by the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The voting process must be fair and equal. And when you don't do that, New Hampshire's got a problem because it's given a discretionary choice to your town moderators or your town politicians, right? Well, they can't decide for themselves whether they want to do it the way they used to do it, or whether they want to introduce, artificial intelligence and have machines do the counting. But that still leaves a really big problem, and that is that the machine can't do the other half of the constitutional part of the job, which is to sort the ballot. See, to sort the ballot, think of the mailman. He sorts the mail at the post office, right? Gets all the envelopes, just like the ballots, gets them all in. He sorts them out, figures out, gee, these goes to that part of town, these go to that part of town, right? And so that's a manual exercise. A vote tabulation device can't do that. It can't examine the ballot, discern voter intent, make sure that the affidavit's properly executed if it's an absentee ballot, and or whether the proper reason is being exercised to vote absentee. So these are the things I'm fighting. And the other thing is changing the words of what the Constitution says about who's qualified to vote. And the Constitution uses the word inhabitant in 33 places. And the Constitution defines an inhabitant, and so does the Article 11 of the Bill of Rights, as someone that possesses political rights. The right to elect somebody, right to vote for somebody, or be elected. The standard is the same. Those are referred to in constitutional law as political rights, the right to elect or be elected. And so that's what the lawsuit's all about. So I filed in lower court, got treated very badly in the lower court. I won't waste time going over negative things. Just get to the point. The motion to dismiss is ultimately granted by the state because the fix is in. They're killing this case. And so I knew it would happen. And so I was prepared. So because the case was laid out in such a manner that I would still have my right to be heard on appeal.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at now. So I filed a mandatory right to appeal. Mm-hmm. The court is taking the case. They ordered all of us to file our briefs by a certain deadline. I filed mine more than a month ago. The state finally filed theirs last Friday.
Yep.
The town of Auburn filed their brief 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
Just right on time that they were supposed to. And they pleaded the fifth. They basically recycled their original grievance, which is whatever the state says is good enough for us.
Exactly.
So that's basically, they basically stated the obvious, right? But it's a nothing burger. There's no statement. But most importantly, they don't, when you're sued, you have to answer or deny the charges, and that which you don't answer or deny are deemed as truthful, right? Deemed as facts and law.
So let me just back up for a second, because you know me, I'm going to pull it out of you, but I'm also going to make sure that I understand it. So you put in, you claim XYZ, you claim that they use these voting machines, blah, 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 and you were injured, whatever that injured is, and they don't answer.
Right.
So your claims on that paperwork are deemed true. So you've been validated, and now the other party cannot come back and say, yeah, but, my bad, I want to fix this. Oh, wait a minute, only Hunter Biden does that. Sorry, we really didn't mean to give you that paperwork. Just give it back. And, oh, by the way, I'm lying. I'm not really the person I say I am. You just can't make this stuff up. So whatever you put in, that other party can no longer come after you for that, because by their silence, refusal to answer that, your allegations and your assertions are deemed true by the court.
Should be. Unfortunately, hold on. What happened to us on the date of the hearing? On the date of the hearing, the judge was changed. Yep. The new judge issued a new health emergency on the spot, threatened everyone with arrest if they didn't wear a mask. Yep. And set up a conflict. So the conflict left me in an unfavorable light while he abused his authority, because he didn't have the authority to do that, right? He can't declare a medical emergency. COVID was no longer an emergency, a declared emergency. So he couldn't just...
But even if it was a declared emergency, he still doesn't have the authority because...
Right, but I'm making the point that the fact there was no emergency.
Okay.
So without having that conversation and going further down the rabbit hole, keep it to the point. There was no health emergency, but he declared one. Why? Then he used a tactical team to threaten us with arrest, right?
Correct.
So all of that was done because a hit job was ordered to kill this case. By implication, see, look, we're dealing with 50 years of institutional corruption at altering our election cycle and the election process. This didn't happen overnight. My case goes back 50 years, that institutionally. And so everyone involved today has unfortunately, a self-interest, a conflict of interest at not litigating the matter and killing the case so that it's never sees the light of day, so that the institution continues to function the way it does. Wow. So I mean, that's what I'm fighting. That's how deep, when we talk deep state. Yeah, absolutely. So the brief, both briefs are in. The town has waived its right. It's chosen to exercise its Fifth Amendment right by waiving its right to oral arguments.
Can a
which
city
is fascinating.
Can a
What's
city
that?
can a city actually do that? I thought only a person could do that.
Well, they're still being sued in their individual capacity, and they have rights.
Okay.
And they are accused of criminal conduct, and they've refused to answer or deny any wrongdoings, any criminal wrongdoings. That's why it's still an unanswered issue. See, the court, one of my questions on appeal, and I'll get to the appeal process in a second. One of my questions on appeal, my third question, is that the lower court never adjudicated the criminal issue. The state didn't answer, the town didn't answer or deny the criminal allegation, and neither did the court adjudicate the matter. So it's an unresolved legal question now before the court, where the rest of it has been ruled upon by the court, but in a disingenuous, Wayne's trying to teach me to be polite.
Yes.
In a very disingenuous manner. And so, in other words, the state lied and the judge went along with their lies and just rubber stamped. They intentionally presented facts about our history, about the law, about the Constitution, about my brief, swore that it was all true. The judge went right down the rabbit hole with them just to kill the case. And now on the appeal, what's difficult about an appeal is I have to prove to the state Supreme Court what errors the court made a mistake on. Did they make errors in fact or errors in law? Right?
Oh.
So issues that are factually wrong, I have to point out all the issues that they factually got wrong. Then I have to prove also any of the law that they cite is wrong, or the fact that they've omitted or refused to, in my case, what they simply do, how they gaslight you is they simply ignore your citation of the case law that should be controlling the question.
Yep.
And just ignore it.
As though it never existed and you never said it.
They speak right past you. It's an amazing tactic.
Isn't that where the terminology glossing it over?
Yeah, gaslighting.
Yep. Just gloss it right over and then gaslight you at the end and go, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So that's where the case is at with the town. So what they did is they simply said, if we file a memorandum of law, we waive our right to oral arguments. And so they filed a memorandum of law and cited that they waived their right to oral arguments. In other words, they gave me a one-page answer, which was a reciting of the current status of the case, what the grievance is, what the current status is. And by the way, we think you were right. Thank you. That's it.
Exactly.
We don't want to talk.
Well, I was just going to say, but we don't want to listen to you. We're just, here we go.
We're, Your Honor, we're not prepared to go to court and argue this before you. So we're happy with what we've just had to say.
Wow. Well, they don't want to further, let's lose our big words, further incriminate themselves. Well,
look, remember the town after Moore v. Harper. So let's go to that. I filed my brief on June 26th. The following day, a landmark decision came down called Moore v. Harper.
Yep.
Moore v. Harper is a North Carolina redistricting case that is appealed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So the backstory is the Republican majority in the state of North Carolina took advantage of their strong majority, redistricted the state in a manner that's beneficial to them, but they did so in a manner that violated their state constitution.
Ooh.
So the Democrats sued and won. They appealed to the state Supreme Court and won. And the North Carolina Republicans were so arrogant, they went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court saying, hey, because our authority to make all the laws for the time, manner, and place for federal elections is delegated to us, the legislature of North Carolina, you, the courts, can't touch us. You, the courts, can't tell us what we can and cannot do. You can't judge whether you like our laws or not. And they said, no. That's not good. No, that's no longer the case. No, you can't do that. The Constitution is very clear. The text of the Constitution delegates to the legislature, not the ballot law commission. It delegates to the legislature the manner in which federal elections are to be conducted. Therefore, this case means that the state Supreme Court has judicial oversight over the way the legislature writes statutes, rules, or regulations, controlling the procedure, controlling the manner in which New Hampshire elections for federal offices are conducted. That's huge.
It's ginormous because right now we've got all these wannabe I am narcissist, dictators.
Right.
All throughout. Oh, here, you clean this, you count that, you pen this, you do that, and they don't have the authority. This is ginormous. This is a huge flip.
The most important thing it does also is it reaffirms that the state legislature is under federal oversight too, which is something which is prior to the case they didn't, right?
Correct.
That was what they were calling independent legislative theory. So that's what that case is all about. So yeah, there was a lot of Republicans that thought that was a bad case, that we lost a fight in that issue, but no, the court actually got it right, and it works to our favor in the overall scheme of things.
Correct. So, I remember sending you a number of Republican people, know-it-alls, that said, oh my God, Daniel's wrong, and this is wrong. And I sent you all those comments, and you were like, boom, this is why. And I sent it right back to them, and I hear nothing. Crickets, nothing. Yeah.
Well, that's the problem, is that now that this new case, so when the town did what it did, it's not to be unexpected that they, being smart lawyers, know that the landscape has changed. Now the rules controlling what the court's got to do have changed. So they can only recite what they did in the lower court.
Right.
That's the thing with an appeal, right? You've got to cover the things that were part of the brief. And so they kicked the can in the lower court too. Their response to the lawsuit was to say nothing about the criminal allegations and say whatever the state defendants say, whatever the Attorney General office offers as an excuse for why we did what we did is good for us.
Right.
So they didn't see. I didn't figure something out until when it came time for the town to file its brief. The state called me looking for an extension of time. So I was going to grant it, but the town didn't call me, right?
Yeah.
I initially granted the state their extension of time because I didn't want to look like a bad guy and not, be flexible, right? Because if I need a favor from the court, I want the court to be flexible for me, right?
Correct.
So I initially granted him, but then the next day he called me looking for an extension for the town. Then I caught on. They were playing a game. That's when I figured out they're trying to get to file all one brief and act as one body because they were covering for the town.
Correct.
Because they see the real responsible party, the real person committing the crime. Sorry.
That's okay.
Anyway.
So the real party committing.
I'm sorry?
So the real party that was committing is where you
is the town. See, right. The town is the body that's textually assigned in the state constitution the duty to conduct a local election. And the three people are the moderator, the selectman, and the clerk.
The clerk, yep.
So that's what the text, we'll get into the new standard of review with the federal Heller-Bruin decision, but you have to look at the text. So the text, that's when I figured out what was going on. The text now assigns to those three individuals the duty to conduct the election. So the state is running political interference.
Yep.
They're running legal cover. So that's when I figured the game out. And so I objected. The town filed its limited brief. And then I objected. The state came back for another extension of time. I objected to the second extension because they tried to cut my reply time in half.
Oh, that's dirty dick,
So I objected on the grounds that you can't, I object on the grounds that you can't deny me my reply time.
Correct.
So the court said, okay, enough of this. They said, okay, you've got 3 days to answer. You got to answer Mr. Richard by Friday. And by the way, Mr. Richard has all 20 of his days available to him once you reply.
Okay.
So my clock began Saturday.
Wow.
So I'm in the midst of writing the brief as we speak.
Boy.
Yeah. So that's, and then I'll finish up with the state. So the state's response is regurgitate what they said in the lower court.
Yep.
Ignore the new standard of review. That's the breaking news.
Moore versus Harper. No, the other one. Bruin.
And the Heller-Bruin methodology, which is what I want to close with. So they did not want to deal with any of that. So they didn't say a word about the new authorities, new late authorities, and because of what I call flipping the what is it called? What is it called? The legal word for the burden, shifting the burden of proof from them to you.
Right.
So no, the court says no, it goes the other way, but I'll be back to that in a second. So yeah, the second part of it is it didn't answer, and it also waived oral arguments. So the state does not want to argue before the state Supreme Court either. So that's how much it thinks of its own arguments, that it doesn't want to, because here's the problem for the state and the town. They can't meet the new standard of review, and all they can do is stay quiet, because they get themselves in trouble if they say anything, because the standard of review, the new change, has left them with no defense.
Correct.
So now they're left with procedure. So they'll look to try to diminish my case with whatever procedural mistake they may try to get out of. I'm not perfect. My case isn't perfect. In procedurally, that's not my area of study, right?
Correct.
I studies the law. And so, so that's the case when a lawyer doesn't have a good case, they argue procedure.
Well, which is what they did when we were in court, and they slipped in that snide little 3-sentence paragraph that, Mr. Richard is not following procedure law, and because he's not a lawyer and didn't attend law school, he is unaware of this, so blah, blah, blah. He's smoking, you guys. You need to sit down and shut up, because this guy is going to take you to the backwoods, let me tell you.
Well, so the closing commentary for your audience tonight is the new standard of review.
From the Supreme Court of the United States.
Over the Second Amendment, several years ago, I believe the Heller decision was decided in 2008. Forgive me if I'm wrong on the date, 205 or 208. The point is, it's the famous Washington, D.C. handgun case. And the Supreme Court finally did take on the Second Amendment of the right to keep arms in your home.
Yep.
It was not the right to keep and bear arms. That comes later. The right to keep your firearm. So the city of Washington, D.C. decided to disallow one of its own police officers the ability to have a service weapon in his home to protect himself when he went home at night, right?
Yep.
So he was denied, and he sued, and he won. When they did that, the Supreme Court set a new standard of review pertaining to your constitutional rights, because through the years, they've heard all of the Bill of Rights have been argued before the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, on to the Eighth, Ninth, and 10th Amendments. All of those types of cases have been argued before. Yep. And so what the Supreme Court said in Heller was, why should the Second Amendment be treated any different than the First? Mm-hmm. In other words, the lower courts and the state courts were applying what's called the means ends scrutiny test. They were putting your right, let's call the Second Amendment, on the scale, and then saying the statutory scheme of the state should be balanced so that the public's interest should outweigh your rights. No. Heller changed all of that. Okay. It said that whenever your rights are implicated by a statute infringing upon it, we'll pick on the Second Amendment again. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So when some statute, state or federal, is written that affects your Second Amendment right, as soon as the text declares that it implicates you, right, you're one of the people. Well, since you're one of the people, the burden automatically shifts to the government now. The government must now prove its case. It must prove that when the Bill of Rights went into effect in 1791, the U.S. Bill of Rights was what this was all about, that it has to prove, the state or the government now has to prove its burden, that the statutory scheme it wants to force on you today was possible in 1791. So let me use the Second Amendment again as an example.
Okay.
In 1792, the federal Congress wrote the Militia Act of 1792 that said all able-bodied men 18 years of age and upwards, right, shall have a musket and gunpowder and lead.
Yep,
right? So they shall openly carry. That's the Militia Act, right? In open. So the court deduced that since in the year 1792, there was an age restriction on open carry, a community today could say, if you're under the age of 18 years of age, you can't openly carry a firearm.
Right.
Because there's an analogous regulation in 1792 that applies specifically at virtually the same time which the amendment was adopted. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking at original intent. You have to look at the text as it meant at the time of its adaptation or ratification. So absentee voting, 1941, 1942, and so on and so forth. Voting machines, absentee, the moderators sorting and counting the ballots. There was no electricity in 1784.
Correct.
So you can't say that a ballot counting device was even contemplated when it said the moderator shall sort and count the ballots.
Yeah. You can't just, again, gloss it over and saying, this is 2023, we have electricity and technology, and we need to use these machines. You can't just arbitrarily pull that out of the hat and shove it down everybody's throat, which is exactly what they've done. And so now this Heller-Bruen case has shifted the burden of proof back off of us to prove that our rights were violated and we were injured, back to the government to prove that it wasn't.
Let me explain the two-step blessing. So Bruen reinforced Heller. Mm-hmm. Bruen was about the right to keep and bear arms in public, New York State versus Bruen, right?
Yep.
That's another landmark decision because it reinforced the Heller methodology and made it binding on all of your other rights. And so then so that was a year ago. I may have had more difficulty convincing the New Hampshire Supreme Court that the Heller decision only affects the U.S. Bill of Rights and not the state Bill of Rights. But see, Moore v. Harper happened a month ago, which says that because the federal right to vote is reviewable by the state and U.S. Supreme Court, now the federal standard of review applies on a state case, and that's how Bruen is now going to control. So the fact is the court should issue at least oral arguments, if not a summary judgment, because guess what they didn't do? The town or the state failed to prove their burden, and so by default, I win. Please rule in my favor, and let's move along, ladies and gentlemen.
OMG. God is good, and he certainly has been just dropping those breadcrumbs right along and slowly, what's the terminology I want? Righting wrongs.
Right.
Wow.
I mean, I'm still, unfortunately, it's not an easy situation to take on the deep state like this. 50 years of corruption. There's how many lawyers? There's 6 lawyers against me.
Yep.
So it's quite the job. And I'm doing my best. So wish me luck.
Absolutely. Blessings and everything. Somebody just posted a question that apparently at the out west when they had Mike Lindell mentioned your name. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
So I guess we need to call Ivan. So Ivan, if you're watching, we need to know, because we know Ivan was there and you were invited.
Yeah, I just couldn't make it. I was so busy with this case. I knew that this was going to land back in my lap at any time.
Oh yeah, and you needed to be able to get going because it's you yourself and God there doing this, because there's no duplicates of you. There's no extra AI Daniel Richards around. So, well, we know what we'll do is we'll give Mike Lindell or Marilyn a call and say, hey, how was Daniel's name mentioned and in what context, and see if we can get answers for that.
Well, very good. Thanks again for inviting me. Have a great night.
Have a great night. Thank you, Daniel.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Night.